Howdy folks, Josh Shipp here. I'm the founder of Youth Speaker University. I'm a former speaker and author in the education space, turned speaking and book agent, helping K-12 and higher ed speakers grow their impact and income. This video is all about architecting a seven-figure speaking business, specifically for speakers focused on the K-12 and higher education space. Look, I recognize there's a lot of videos, articles, online ads you see talking about, oh, you can make all this money speaking, it's easy, blah, blah, blah. This video, honest to goodness, no hype. I'm not saying any of this stuff is going to be easy. Actually, each of these steps that I will show you will take years and an obscene amount of work, iteration, failure, dedication, all of those things. So no hype in this video. Rather, what I've seen both as a speaker and author, and then as a speaking and book agent, what it takes to actually build this level of a business as a speaker. So no hype, just 6 product offerings built sequentially. So a thriving speaking business is not built randomly. It is architected deliberately. That means one offering at a time in the right sequence for the right audience. So not trying to build or launch or do everything at once, but deliberately, offering by offering, say, this is the first thing I'm going to build, and then only once it gets to a certain level, then will I add on a second offering or begin to approach a second project. And this is the exact 6 offering framework I've used to help other speakers in the education space scale their impact. Again, no hype. So all of this is like eventually. Even with all these folks that have been successful, even with myself when I was a speaker and author, this stuff took obscene amounts of hard work. Many times of like, what on earth am I doing? Tons of tears, tons of, chasing distractions and rabbit tails and wasted money and like, ooh, that doesn't move the needle. That was a waste of time. All right, so I'm going to try to take all of that information, all of those learnings, both being the person out there doing it and now the person behind the scenes supporting the folks that are out there doing it, what it actually looks like. So offering number 1 is speaking. Everything builds from this. Speaking allows you to sharpen your message, elevate your credibility, and it also funds your future offerings. Simply put, speaking allows you to incubate your message, meaning you're out there actually standing on stages, testing it, seeing what people resonate with, what they don't, and also more quickly, not easily, not immediately, stabilizing and eventually replacing your income so that you can dedicate yourself to this full time. And that money is not only going to allow you to put more time into your speaking business, it's also going to be the thing that funds your future product offering. So let's talk about realistic eventual income potential with just the speaking part of your speaking business. Now, again, these numbers, I don't mean like it's going to happen quickly or immediately. And also these numbers are realistic numbers. So this assumes nothing unusual happens. This assumes you're not, a former president or, write a book that sells 80 bazillion copies or that sort of thing. $3,000 to $15,000 per gig in the education space, depending on your specific audience niche and spin-off yield. So audience niche, I've made other videos about this, sort of the different typical fee ranges within each audience niche within the education space. And then by spin-off yield, I mean this. Sitting in each of your audiences are your next 5 bookings. So imagine an audience of 500 people. There are 5 people sitting in that audience, typically, that are either planning their own event or are one phone call away from the decision maker that is planning that event. Meaning, is your speech so good that after they see you, all that they're thinking is, my God, she was incredible. We have to have her speak to our people. We have to have her at our event. That's what I mean by spin-off yield, is out of those potential 5 bookings sitting in your audience of 500, how many of those do you yield? And there's no marketing trickery or shortcut to that, to maximizing your spin-off yield. It is just the soul-crushing work, second by second, minute by minute of your speech, of making it absolutely extraordinary. And regarding your speaking, you want to first optimize for mastery and then later optimize for income for this very reason, in order to maximize your spin-off yield. Meaning, in the beginning, your fee should be so affordable that people have no problem taking a chance on you, no problem taking a risk on you. Because, look, even if in the beginning, when I first started, my first gigs were free, and then like $200, and then like $500, and then, oh my gosh, now $1,000. But I would say probably the first couple years, I rarely got paid more than $1,000 per speech. But that was getting paid something to get reps in and to get practice, so that later I could easily command $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 per gig. Now, let's talk about a threshold here. The threshold, depending on your life stage, whether you're married, whether you got kids, maybe relationship, family, health dynamics, typically the threshold I've seen here is about 50 gigs per year, which equals about 100 days per year of travel. That tends to be sort of the healthy threshold where you're not sort of worn out and burnt out from all the travel, and yet you're out there enough where you have that strong spin-off, where, because the message is really good, you're doing it enough where the message and your delivery stays in shape, and you're in front of enough audiences where, as I talked about that spin-off yield, those 5 bookings sitting in your audience, the more you're out there speaking, the more you get asked to go out and speak again. But typically 50 gigs per year is kind of the ceiling where you're maximizing your ability to be out there to make a good living, but you're also not fried and burning out. So that means, depending on, again, your audience niche, this and this alone could be $150,000 to $750,000 per year in income. Again, eventually. There are so many different aspects that go into each and every one of these product offerings. The purpose of this video is not to dig into the details. There are hundreds of little details that make a difference with each of these offerings. It's rather to give you an overview. All right, so let's move on now to offering number 2, merch. So when I talk about merch, I'm not talking about flagship products. I'm not talking about a book, a course, a curriculum. No. Think of like being at a concert and getting the concert t-shirt. That's what I'm talking about. Affordable reinforcements of your message. I'm talking about $5 things, $10 things, $20 things, absolute max price point. Wristbands, shirts, journals, downloads. These are things not designed for those 5 decision makers that are sitting in your audience. It's designed for the 500 people that are sitting in your audience. So eventual realistic income here, like $300 to $2,000 per gig, depending on the size of the audience. So for the first 10 years, I spoke mostly to students. So if I was speaking at a school, well, sometimes that school would be like, hey, we don't want you to sell merchandise. So that gig, I would make literally $0 in merchandise. Sometimes they wouldn't mind. But this is a school, so it's not like it's just a random school day that they're having an assembly. Typically, the students don't know they're having an assembly, so it's not like, oh, let me bring $20 in case this speaker's awesome and I want to buy a t-shirt to remind me of their message. So some school gigs, I would make like $300 in merch sales. Now, sometimes conferences where students are there a couple days and then the parents give them some spending money, those conferences could be quite large. Those, it would be very, very, very common for me to walk away with $2,000 extra in just merchandise sales. And a handful of events, many amounts more than that. So again, this depends on audience size and type. Now, the threshold here is that as a speaker, merchandise is a little bit frustrating, like the hauling around of it, right? You don't want to check a bag. You put it in your carry-on. Okay, there's 1,000 people there. How many shirts do I bring? Like what sizes? Do I really want to haul this with me? Well, I remember this one event, I brought 100 shirts and I only sold 10, and that was super awkward. So really the threshold here is sort of out of laziness and convenience of the grind of travel, is that sometimes you just don't want to do it. You're also going to need a clear workflow and sort of checkpoint in your booking process in order to acquire explicit permission from the person that hired you, right? Because you don't want to jeopardize a $5,000 booking in order to try to sell a couple $100 in merchandise because you didn't get clear permission to do that. Now, instead of them recommending you to other event planners, they're like, man, this guy kind of burned me because he either pitched it and went on and it became this big infomercial, or, we have clear guidelines that we're not allowed to do that on campus, and now he's caused this big headache for me. So again, realistic income potential, 300 to 2K per gig. So what could that mean for you if you're hitting that 50 gigs per year? This could mean an additional $15,000 to $100,000 per year in extra income for you. Now, moving on to offering number 3, your platform. What do I mean by platform? This means the following. If you think of speaking gigs, these are essentially rented stages, right? You are a hired gun for someone's event to stand in front of their group of 500 people and speak to them. That might feel like your audience. It's not. It's the organization's audience. That is a rented stage. But when you build a platform, like a podcast, YouTube channel, email newsletter, blog articles, online community, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, webinar series, online events, quiz funnels, that is a stage that you own. Now, what's the eventual realistic income here? Well, it starts off being actually nothing, or even more truthfully, negative, right? It costs you money up front, and then it pays you later. And because of this dynamic, this is incredibly difficult for most speakers to wrap their mind around. Because as speakers, and I was guilty of this, we get addicted to the guaranteed paycheck and guaranteed audience. As a speaker, you have grown accustomed to the dynamic of, hey, I ain't leaving my home until we guarantee upon a fee, an event date, and like an audience, right? And all those things are your responsibility. The organization, like, you're going to pay me, you're going to put the audience in the seats, you're going to plan the event, organize it, get the AV, and then I just show up and do my thing. Whereas a platform, you take on all of that burden. So again, as a speaker, if you're out there speaking a lot, it can feel like you kind of have an audience, but really, respectfully, you sort of don't. You're borrowing audiences. You're skipping from audience to audience. Now, do some of those folks follow you online or subscribe to your thing? Yes. Can you be very successful without building your own online platform? Can you just be sort of a road warrior and be very successful in the space? You 100% can. However, every offering that follows this will struggle if you ain't on the road. Meaning, if you want to write and publish a book, you will struggle to sell copies of that book unless you are out there speaking. If you have a course, you will struggle to sell access or copies of that course unless you are out there speaking. So eventually, realistically, as you're building this probably costs you $2,000 a month in expenses, costs you time. That cost will increase as your platform grows, as the complexity of it grows. But eventually, you can either have ad revenue And here's sort of the standard range, $2 to $27 per 1,000 impressions. Or even more wisely, you can advertise your own products and services on this platform that you build. And if you do this right, you can eventually sell tickets to your own events, either virtually or in person. So for many speakers, this is just a bridge too far. It requires a whole different way of thinking. It requires you to put money out up front. But if you do this and you are patient, this is not a thing that happens quickly, right? A speaking gig, you can get an inquiry and then a signed contract within 30 days. Building a platform and gathering an audience around that is going to take years. So as you consider this, is this something I want to do? You want to be thinking, what is something that I can dedicate myself to? 52 weeks a year for years, not something just short term I can sort of post once or upload once or, create something once and hope that it catches fire. This is something you're going to have to be willing to put in a significant amount of work for, and even then it might not work, right? If we're being honest, let's be honest. Even then it might not work. You might have to iterate. You might have to iterate. You might have to go, that isn't really the right platform for me. That's not really where my audience is or where my tone or style necessarily works. But if you are willing to do it, and if it is eventually successful, the payoffs are significant. Because then, think of how excited you would be if you got booked to speak at an event with 100,000 people. You'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Can't wait for April because I'm going to speak at that event. There's going to be 100,000 people there. Holy cow. But if you build your own platform, you could reach 100,000 people every single day, which means every single day you would have the opportunity to inspire 100,000 people, to empower 100,000 people to do a thing, or to pitch to them your next product or offering or service. Moving on, offering number 4, a book. This is your message and methodology captured in a format that scales without your presence. Now, the challenge here for speakers is, let me just be brutally honest, many speakers, their message is not that helpful if you remove their charisma, personal story, or on-stage persona. So writing a book forces you as a speaker to deepen your message beyond your personal story or charisma. And as someone who's written 4 books myself, I can tell you this is brutal. This is very, very challenging. Just writing the book alone, if you do it well, will take you over a year. And it will be very challenging and require an extraordinary amount of your time. But if you do it well, that is a product that scales without your presence. You could sell, you can only sell 1 speech per date on the calendar. You could sell 1,000 books every day for the rest of your life if the book is so helpful that after someone reads it, they text 5 of their closest friends and say, my goodness, you have to go see it. You have to read this book. And if you go through the excruciating work of writing a book on your message, I will tell you that it will instantly make your keynotes, your speeches, 30% better. You will instantly be going, oh man, I really like the way that clarify this idea in this book. Man, it's way more clear in my book than it is my speech. So you circle back to the speech, and the speech instantly gets upgraded because of the clarity that is forced within a book. So eventual realistic income. Again, these things are not quick things, right? You could create a t-shirt, merch, wristband in a week. You ain't creating a book in a week, even with AI. Not one that sells for years and years and years. The only way a book sells for years and years and years is not clever marketing. Clever marketing can launch a book well, but word of mouth only happens with nonfiction books if the book is honest to goodness helpful. I mean, think of how many books you have recommended to friends. Probably 5, 10. How do you get your book in those 5 or 10 that people constantly recommend to their friends? That's the way you sell books years and years and years and years, regardless of whether or not you're out there speaking. So eventual realistic income, it's about $1 to $10 per book sold. Here's what it looks like, just candidly. Self-published books, you're going to earn more per copy, $5 to $10 per book, depending, but you cover all the expenses up front. If you work with a niche, smaller publisher, you're going to make about $1 to $3 per book royalty and expect about a $5,000 to $15,000 advance. If you work with a major publisher, you're going to earn about $1 to $2.50 per book and receive around a $50,000 to $250,000 advance. Now, annually, what does this mean? Well, sales depend entirely, as I've alluded to, on word of mouth. How helpful is the actual book? Now, that's beyond bulk sales that you can do, bundling them with a speaking gig or back of the room sales. After you speak to an audience, you can say, hey, here's my book, here's info about it. You can, I'll be signing copies back there. You can come grab one. Again, all those sorts of sales depend on you being out there on the road. This is all about building impact and income when you're not on the road. Offering number 5 is a online course. So this is essentially one-to-one coaching at scale. Your methodology as a guided experience. Now, this is part of why I encourage doing a book first for 2 reasons. Number 1, you have now taken the time to create a methodology, not just a compelling story. Right? So something that works without you. That's the book. I recognize an audiobook, you're voicing it, but still, in general, like those are your words, you're not there with the person. And oftentimes if they're reading it, right, they're reading it to themselves and their voice not listening to you. And print sales still account for about 50% of book sales. However, with a course, you're sort of weaving yourself back into the experience. And now, on video, online, you are essentially a one-on-one coach to these individuals at scale. You are guiding them through your pragmatic, helpful methodology. So it's a bit of the best of both worlds. Now, the challenge and threshold here for speakers is that it's a bit of a learning curve to deliver on camera. If you've just grown accustomed to delivering on stage, where the audience is like 100 feet away from you, there is a nuance when you're delivering on screen where the audience is 10 inches away from you. It's also not a one-to-many conversation, like, hey, how many of you out there? No, it's a one-to-one conversation. Someone's watching your course on their phone, on their TV, on their laptop. They're not sitting in a big conference room of 500 people watching your course, typically. It's a one-to-one guided coaching experience with you walking them through your helpful methodology. So eventual realistic income here, in the K-12 and education space, typically $20 to $100 per course sold, and you need to assume like 10% platform expenses for each course sold, just for kind of overhead of tech and these sorts of things. The second reason why I encourage folks to do a course after a book is that the actual selling of the course sort of requires you to learn the skill set of being an online marketer. With a book, right, you can get that initial. Let me just break it down, all right, for you verbally. With a book, you can get your first 1,000 readers by promoting your book through speaking gigs, right? So you speak at a thing with 500 people. Next week, another thing with 500 people. Next week, another thing with 500 people. At each of those events, let's say you get 50 people to buy the book. Eventually, you're going to get 1,000 people that have bought that book. And then if you've written the book correctly, You're going to have 1,000 people that have read it, and at least half of them are going to text their 5 friends and say, holy cow, this book was so helpful, you have to get it. So now you had 1,000 readers, 500 of them recommend it to 5 of their friends, and then let's say half of them read it. So then that snowball begins, if you're following me. With a course, so you can really just sell a book through kind of what you've already got going on. With a course, it requires you to learn a whole different skill set. You have to learn being an online marketer, getting people to give you their email address, give them sort of a free sample of it, follow up, retargeting ads. What happens if someone buys? What happens if someone visits the page but don't buy? Do you have retargeting ads? Do you have retargeting offers? Do you have discounted incentives for them? Do you have a free trial? And then after the free trial, then they get opted into the course. There's a bazillion different ways that you can sell your course. And this requires you learning the skill set of an online marketer, which introduces so much more complexity, which is why I recommend the book first and then the course. And then offering number 6, lastly, licensing. Your best clients want more than inspiration. They want frameworks that they can implement across their organization. So this could look like curriculum. Let's say you could have something that schools or school districts use in their onboarding and teaching of new trainers or of new teachers, You could have something that schools or school districts use with their grade K through 3 students about emotional intelligence, right? So this could look like a organization-wide curriculum. This could look like a train the trainer offering. This could look like a certification where other people are out there teaching your methodology. And then within certification, there are various different business models that you could pursue. So this is last because it is the most sophisticated and complex offering that you could create. This is something that you really need both technology, sophisticated marketing, and at bare minimum, a team of 2, meaning someone that's running sort of front-end sales. Hey, what is this? How do we customize? There's going to be lots of questions and Zoom meetings and follow-up and back and forth. And you need someone in customer success that is onboarding them once they've purchased it, make sure they're having a good experience, learning, where people get stuck, improving the product, these sorts of things. So the realistic income here is quite sizable, but it is a very complex business model that you want to hold off until you have a variety of things in place, right? You want to make sure you have a methodology that works without you. That is the point of the book, of the course. You want to have the sophistication to be able to market to other organizations. That is a bit of the point and skill set you're going to learn through selling a course. You're going to need to build and hire a team to help support this. You're going to need the money to pay those folks. So the realistic income here can be $5K to $200K per year per license sold. Here's what it can realistically look like. At a single site location, so that could be, James Smith Middle School is going to use your curriculum. They, in their budget, could easily pay $5 to $15,000 per year, depending on what all sort of tools, curriculum, technology that you offer bundled in your particular license. If it's a multi-site, so let's say it's a school district and they have 30 schools in their school district, you could be looking at $15 to $50,000 plus per year for a multi-site. And then if it's a national organization, some sort of business that works with students or some sort of youth supporting organization, like let's say Big Brothers Big Sisters wants to be able to offer your particular curriculum to all of their sites and all of their locations, well, obviously that would be a quite sizable contract per year. Now again, this requires an extraordinary amount of nuance and sophistication, and therefore, even though it can be quite impactful, you can reach a lot of people, and it can be quite lucrative, there's a lot to consider here. So zooming out, here's what everything looks like. Speaking, merch, platform, book, course, licensing. each of these things, merch you can get up and running very quickly. So other than merch, each of these things is probably going to realistically take you a couple years to get going decently, and then a few more years beyond that to really get it humming. That's just the honest to goodness truth. And within that 2 to 4 year span, it's going to be a lot of hiccups, failures, iteration required, an extraordinary level of detail and excellence required to the little bitty details. But if you build in this order, you can have extraordinary impact and income potential within the K-12 and higher ed space. So there you have it, the architecture behind building a thriving speaking business. Now for someone who's watched this video, this very nerdy, long video, and you want some help doing this, check us out at USpeaker University. Inside of our course, yes, we indeed have a course, we help K-12 speakers and higher ed speakers methodically build each and every one of these offerings. We have detailed videos into every single aspect of each of these offerings that I covered within this video. So that concludes this video on just some honest to goodness straight talk on what it looks like to architect a 7-figure speaking business. Thanks for watching. Take care.